Great. Let's get started. Happy to see a lot of smiling faces here. I've been interacting with all of you, the one-on-one check-ins, and very happy to see the progress you're making in understanding your mind, in creating wholesome states of mind for yourself, and cleaning up things internally. All of this will be very helpful in also changing the way you look at different circumstances. One thing we talk about is you know being able to use a set of skills, and over time a lot of these skills start getting internalized, and they also start, sometimes you don't even need to use them because they become so automated. There are changes that happen to us as we continue practice, as we continue to be mindful, as we continue to use harmonious practice, and as we continue to cultivate wholesome states of mind. Today, I'm going to start talking. So far, we've been looking at the different skills. We've been looking at how attention moves, how our experience of life happens from one thought to another as our attention moves from that. We've started training ourselves on specific skills, being able to identify when our mind gets distracted, being able to bring it back to where we intend it to be without violence. Also, we've discussed how over time we can start training our mind to stay without any effort and in a very joyful manner with whatever we intend to do. Now, what we want to do is, like I said, so the Buddha wanted really to get into the absolute core of human experience, understand how human experience happens. And to do that, we now need to start getting zooming in further and further and start seeing what is actually happening when we are involved in a particular thought process, right? So, how is that moment of experience coming together? How did it start? And what happens next? What happened before it started, right? So, that is what we'll start getting into over the next couple of days, understanding the mechanism of the mind in more and more detail. So the Buddha always used two things in across different practices. So one, he extensively used the concept of root cause analysis. So if there is something that is happening, something that is emerging, something that is manifested, what was the basis for it? What were the conditions that brought it about? Okay, that is one way of thinking, and always thinking in terms of what is the basis of something and how is the depend. Does the thing first thing depend completely on the second thing, and does modifying the second thing affect the first thing completely? The root cause analysis, one thing that he used very extensively, and we'll see more examples of that. The other thing that he used to do is do a lot of classification. So try to understand what is the set of classes that cover one entire theme, right? So for example, in case of hindrances or distractions, we saw how there was a classification of greed and aversion, restlessness and sloth and doubt. And we can look at any experience that we're having and we can see that it is either a compound or a derivative of one of these classes, right? So today is going to be, discussion is about one of the classifications here, which is to examine what are the ingredients that need to come together for us to have one moment of human experience. Okay. So it's like if you want to create a dish that is called human experience, then what are the ingredients that need to be part of it? These are called the aggregates or the skandhas or the khandas in Pali. It literally means skandh or khan literally means a pile or a, so if you have a bunch of ingredients, it's like a pile of ingredients. So we're going to talk about some of those ingredients and how they come together to help us have an experience. I just share my screen and then we'll start our discussion for today. So the first thing we do is start with how we actually interact with the world. What is our window to the world, right? So our window to the world are the sense bases. So the five sense bases are something that we're all familiar with always: the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the body. Each one has its own type of experience. I see form, see sights. It responds to visual information, right? So that is the eye. Your ear responds to changes in pressure. It responds to auditory information. Your nose responds to olfactory information, molecules that have a certain characteristic, and we infer certain smells from them. The body can be both the touch of our skin as well as movements that are happening within our own body, right? So you might feel a pain, or you might feel hungry, you might get a signal for that, or you might feel some tightness somewhere, right? So those are experiences that we can have with the body. Cleavers with the tongue. And the Buddha also talked about the mind as a sense base, which a mind being a sense base that processes information, right? Mental information. So anything, if I tell you anything right now, for example, what we are speaking, although you're hearing it with your ears, you're seeing my body language, and seeing my lips move with your eyes, but eventually what I'm saying is fitting somewhere in the form of mental information and fitting somewhere in the map of mental information that you have in your mind, right? So the mind is a sense base that responds to mind objects or thoughts or information that is incident on it. These are our window to the world. Without these, if you don't have eyes, for instance, you don't have any visual experience, right? Without ears, you don't have any auditory experience. So without these sense bases, there is no experience happening. So this is the first ingredient, not just the sense bases, but the sense basis is our window to the world, but there is also corresponding matter. There's an entire physical realm. There's a realm that allows us to communicate, that we can actually register, that we can actually experience. So there are things out in the world that from where we get visual information, from where we hear sounds, from where we smell things, etc. So the entire realm of matter, and matter as well as the physical realm also includes things like light, for example, electromagnetic radiation. Everything is comes in the aggregate of roop, okay, roop or form, material form. The sense basis being our window to that, and therefore critical in our experience related to that. So the next ingredient in our experience is the ability to start making sense of information, start differentiating different things. So without, if you are looking at the screen, you can see some words that are written. You can see probably in a corner of your screen, you can see me speaking. You can differentiate me from the background, right? So all this is happening due to information processing faculties called Vigyan, right? So when I'm saying different words, you can separate maybe from the background noise that is coming or the sounds that are around you. You can listen to what I'm saying. If somebody else was speaking, you would be able to recognize that it is somebody else, not me, that is speaking, right? So the ability to differentiate between information, being able to process information. We're still not talking about what that information actually is, what it represents. So we're not talking about me specifically, but your ability to differentiate my body in this image, for example, from the wall behind me. So just a few examples of how it works. So in this image, you can see people of different heights. You can see that they have different heights. You can distinguish them from the background, right? You can see where their t-shirts start and end versus where their skin is. You can discern, teeth from nose and eyes. You can discern curly hair from straight hair. You can discern complexion and infer race, right? So the ability to make sense of information is Vigyan. And there is Vigyan or information processing ability that is connected with each of the sense base. I think I'll need to just earphones. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay, great. So that was one example. Another example is different expressions, right? So it's the same ear, nose, face, but there are some changes. And you can, without any doubt, even if you aren't able to say exactly what that expression is, you can say that they're different from each other. You can see if there is a transition from one expression to another. Again, this image represents a very popular children's game or puzzle called Where's Waldo, right? So in this image, you can differentiate what is the background. You can differentiate things that are in the foreground. Then you can differentiate objects from humans, right? So there is a spear, there is a helmet, there's a sword. You can differentiate them from each other, and you can also see that there are people with fewer clothes and people that are fully clothed. And out of that, you're able to see somebody with red and white stripes, right? And you're able to do that. So you're able to continuously process information and separate it and see where things change. What is the difference between one set of information and another? If you weren't able to do that, you'd see everything as a single blur, right? Or you would hear all sounds, you will hear everything, but you won't be able to make any sense of what is happening. So Vigyan, again, associated with every sense wave, right? You can, if you taste something, you can start actually figuring out the different ingredients that went to it, right? If you smell something, you can smell something delicious, right? You can try to guess what is being made, right? So information processing abilities known as Vijnana or Vigyan. So this is the second ingredient. The third ingredient is called Vedana or feeling, right? So Vedana is like a pre-conceptual feeling. So we have still not said what things are. We are just processing information. Now this information will create some kind of a feeling in us, right? So for example, if you were to look at an image like this, you'd probably get a pleasant feeling. So on the left, I have something like a thermometer which says like the higher you go, the greener you are. It's more pleasant feeling. And for example, if you see something delicious, or if you were to smell this, if you are a pizza lover, definitely you'd get a pleasant feeling, right? So this feeling allows the mind to start understanding whether there is an opportunity or a threat. So with every threat or everything that is unpleasant, the mind-body system will generate an unpleasant feeling, right? So for example, if you were to touch something very hot, you would have an unpleasant feeling. Even before you know what it is, even before you figured out what mistake you did, what body part really got hurt, you would first feel an unpleasant feeling. Or if you were to be walking alone in the dark and you were to hear something that sounds like a wild animal, right? You might feel some fear even before you register exactly what it is, even if you don't know what it is, right? So Vedana, similarly, if you were to see this river that is clogged up with plastic refuse, you might get an extremely unpleasant feeling. So Vedana or feeling, before you have named anything, before you have attached any concepts or anything, it is the first thing that it is a process that says, is this good or bad? Is this pleasant or unpleasant? Do I like it or do I not like it? It gives a flavor of it, right? So the more unpleasant draws you towards it, I mean, with the wish of getting away from it or staying away from it. And the more pleasant will draw you towards it with the wish of trying to go towards it. So Vedana is simply that valence, you can call it, the intensity of painful or pleasant feeling, as well as the sensation of that feeling. So what sensation does something create within? So this is the third ingredient. Now let's go to the fourth ingredient. Okay, so this is interesting. It's called Sanya or Sangya. So this is translated in many ways. It's called perception, for most commonly in English translation. But I think everybody who's here, I think, has some exposure to Hindi or Sanskrit. And Sangya is very simple. It is a noun, right? So Sangya is the aggregate of concepts, right? So what is the aggregate of concepts? So this is a bunch of lines, right? But I think everybody on this call can tell what it represents, right? You see a bunch of lines, but it represents a person, a concept that all of us can identify. Mahatma, right? you're not actually seeing the person. You're not even seeing the person's likeness, right? You're not even seeing a photo of that person from this angle. You don't know. It is just a screen that you're looking at. It's a bunch of lines on the screen in a color that probably doesn't even appear naturally on this person, right? But you're able to connect what that person is. You're able to attach a concept, a label to it. I'm sure all of you must have been confronted with, are you a robot questions at some point of time, right? If you look at this now, what is happening is we are using Vigyan or information processing to be able to first see, that there are different images, that these two, for example, are not the same image. And you're actually able to see that there are 9 images here. Every image you're able to see different features, right? You're able to distinguish between the different features, sky, tree. Now the sky is a concept, the tree is a concept. When we come here, we see grass, we see a tree, we see a road, and we see a vehicle. But we also have more labels. It's nested, right? So with that vehicle, we see that this is probably a car or a minivan, right? So we don't click it as a bus. Here we see something, we call it a bus. Again, this is just an image of a bus. This is not an actual bus standing in front of you, right? And you can still tell it's a bus, right? Similarly, over here, you can tell that this is a bus. So the labels that we attach to different things. What is a chair? For example, a stool might be considered as a chair. Chair with a backrest can be considered as a chair. A chair with an armrest can be considered as a chair. You've got the yoga balls that can also be considered as a chair. And when it comes to actual functionality, you might even sit down on the side of on the curb of a road and do whatever you need to do at that point of time, and it acts like a chair. So you have different concepts of things which are flexible and which you can, in a context, you're able to understand what concept you can apply to it. And this can become very complex. So it is not just visual specific things that you can talk about. So concepts also can extend to extremely complex. So you have a conception of freedom, you have a conception of justice, of betrayal, of respect, of success, of equality, of exploitation, of adventure, of joy, right? So we have concepts of different things. This is the 4th aggregate that comes together for an experience. Finally, we come to something very interesting. A word again, everybody on this call would have heard somewhere or the other, sankhara or sanskar. So what is sanskar? So normally we hear the word sanskar and the popular connotation is, okay, values that have been instilled. But actually this is a very interesting thing. The best way to translate this, in my opinion, is conditioning. Okay, the formations, fabrications are actually words that are used in traditional translations from Pali to English, but conditioning is what I feel is most appropriate. So throughout our lives, we perform certain actions, we have some experiences, and they change the way we make decisions. Right? So I'll give you an example. So this is an example of this image represents a study called the marshmallow test, right? So which was done many years ago. This was to see whether the ability to delay your gratification actually affects your outcomes in life. Right? A bunch of kids were called and they were asked to sit in a room. They were given a marshmallow and then they were told that the adult who's conducting this experiment, right, would say that I'm stepping out of the room for 10 minutes. If you can hold on for 10 minutes, I'll come back and give you 2 marshmallows. But if you eat this marshmallow, I won't give you any. And the idea was to see which kids were able to actually delay their gratification, and then they tried to see outcomes that those kids had in career or family or friendship or whatever, so health, And I won't go into the details of it, but why is it that one child chooses to eat the marshmallow versus another child doesn't choose to eat the marshmallow? So this is the impact of conditioning, the way we perceive an identical situation. will be very different based on the impressions and experiences that we've had in life. And no matter how close people are, whether they're from the same family, whether they've been living together for years, their conditioning makes them respond to the same situation differently. So conditioning kind of decides how different concepts, so even different concepts. So if a concept of freedom or equality will mean very different things. So even these kind of concepts will mean very different things for different people. Sanskara represents all the conditioning that you had from your actions and your experiences. Other examples of this, if you take ice cream flavors, you'll have hardcore supporters of each flavor. Why do people differ? People say I have a different taste, but where is that? So you might have a concept of this. You might have a feeling that comes up in your mind related to this. You might have a information processing ability that says that this is cold and this should be nice. This is creamy. The texture is creamy. It's sweet, right? You'll be able to say it is strawberry. You'll be able to say these things. You'll be able to apply those concepts of strawberry, sweet, etc. You can make sense of it. But why is it that one person will always prefer chocolate over strawberry or vanilla over chocolate, right? That is again coming down to conditioning. What the kind of base of your personality? Where is your specific tendencies? Where are they stored? Right? Similarly, another example, tidy room on the left, untidy room on the right. And the person who maintains a tidy house will never understand why the other situation is acceptable to the other person, and vice versa. The other person will never understand why one would put the effort to make it look that tidy. So this is what we have. I have an image of all the ingredients for ginger tea on the right. I really enjoy ginger tea. And this is what needs to come together to make the ginger tea that is a particular experience of every. Every time these ingredients come together, there'll be a slight variation, right? And you will have differences in experience. So form, material form, something that kind of kicks off your experience. It can also be a thought that kicks off your experience. So you have form, the sense bases that can actually interact with the world. You have feeling, right? Feeling or sensation. Pleasantness or unpleasantness expressed as a sensation that is related with a certain experience that you have. You have concepts related to that experience, and you have a specific way in which you will experience that, right? So you have a conditioning. So someone will prefer less milk, someone will prefer more milk. When you put these together, when you have these ingredients together, you will also have a certain sensation. So your sense bases will interact with the tea. Depending on how hot it is, you'll get a pleasant or unpleasant sensation. If you prefer hot tea and you get something that is cool, you'll get an unpleasant sensation. Or if you don't really like very warm beverages and you drink something that's absolutely at boiling point, you'll get a different sensation, right? So sensation gives you helps you understand that Vigyan or consciousness helps you to distinguish it from other flavors. If you're having a biscuit with it, you can distinguish the flavor of the biscuit with the tea. You can understand, get a sense of how much ginger is versus the last tea that you had. Conditioning tells you how much affects how much you enjoy it. What do you think after it? Do you feel grateful for it, or do you feel it could have been made better? All those things, your experience is affected by conditioning. How you specifically react when you have that tea. Do you drop everything and enjoy it, or do you do it along with 5 other things? So these are the things that make up human experience. The 5 aggregates, coming together of the 5 aggregates makes up human experience. If any of the aggregates is missing, your experience does not really happen. So feeling, sensation, giving that particular kind of feeling of pleasantness or unpleasant to it. The material realm that is actually helping initiate something happening. Even a thought is transmitted as electromagnetic waves, right? So you have some kind of material realm, the physical realm, where the laws of physics work, that needs to exist for an experience to happen. Your conditioning will determine how you specifically feel about it, right? You don't feel the same as everybody else. Your concepts will help you ascribe certain meaning to it. What is the context? What is happening right now? Is this good? Is it bad? Right? So you have certain judgment, certain meaning that you're ascribing to the situation. And your consciousness actually helps you to make sense of, you differentiate between all the things that are coming in, right? So you're experiencing multiple things. You are able to experience some things as different from other things. When you have a sip of tea, you have a lot of air also coming in, but you are able to distinguish the taste of the tea as well. Great. So that's a topic I wanted to introduce, and not too much else today. Tomorrow, what we'll do is we will dive into more about how that particular experience comes to be. Right? So how is it that our attention actually went to it at the first place? How does our attention engage with it? And what results out of it? How do actions happen at the end of it? How does decision making happen at the end of it? How does that actually become? So you have a certain experience, you have a slice of your life where all these things are coming together. But how is the movement happening? How does this start? How do we engage with this? How does it end? And how do we move on to the next thing? So we'll get into the detail. So we gotten into the anatomy of a moment. What are all the ingredients that come together to help you have that experience of that moment? Now we'll try to place that moment in context with what happened before and what happens after. So that will be the upcoming sessions. Yeah, I'll just take a break today. Just wanted to share some of these things. And you can start in your practice. You will be able to start seeing some of those things, right? So those who are going more deep into your practice, you'll start seeing when certain feeling, like initial sensations start coming up. Right? You'll start seeing that. You'll start understanding how these things need to come together. Great. Any thoughts, any questions on this? Okay, I'll just make one quick comment. You can think about anything you might want to ask about this or comment about this. But the idea of this is to also understand how any experience is dependent on other things happening. So we've talked about our things coming up in our attention, and then we have an experience of chasing after this, or we have an experience of letting it go and then it goes. So everything that is happening is dependent on these 5 aggregates coming together in a certain way. Even if one of the aggregates is different, it will affect how we experience it. So for example, if we are driving a vehicle and somebody overtakes us very rashly, right? We will have immediately an unpleasant feeling associated. Now, over time, for example, if we start using the 6 R's, not really worrying about it, not really getting irritated about it, what this does is also starts changing our condition. Our mind is learning from every experience, right? Conditioning or sanskar is the union of all the impressions of all the actions you have taken and all the experiences you have had. So your sanskar or conditioning starts changing. You start changing your actions. And what that also affects, sanskar also affects how you process information. It affects your vigyan. It also affects how you feel the sensation of something happening, right? So the next time, once you do it successfully for a few times, the next time that somebody overtakes you rashly, you don't care. There's not too much you can do. Going and fighting with that person is not really an intelligent option. Feeling frustrated about it and spoiling the rest of your day is not an intelligent option. And what happens is, as we keep changing, so we have the capacity to change, and the change happens by changing our actions. We affect our conditioning, and when we affect our conditioning, our experience of those moments starts to change. Many of you have already reported seeing changes in how you're interacting with people, how you're interacting with other people. Today, in one of the interviews, a person was telling me that they've been terrified of dogs all their lives, but today, when
they came across two large dogs, they actually had a very different sensation. Their Vedana, or they didn't have a painful feeling, they actually had a pleasant feeling. Here is another being that I can be kind towards, that I can send a good wish to, and it completely changed their perspective of that moment. So human experience can be changed through our attention, and how that attention works is by changing these aggregates. And of all these aggregates, we'll also talk about how we can design our actions to start changing our aggregates better. The aggregate that we have least control over is form, because of the the world outside and the form inside. We have more limited control, but on actions, on the way we process information, the feelings that are generated, all these can be changed by the actions and experiences that we have, affecting our conditioning and changing the flavor of experience. Great. So that's what I was. This is setting up for the discussion that we'll have tomorrow, where we'll start understanding the context of that slice of experience that we're talking about. Great. Any thoughts, questions? Okay, great. Then we'll end today's session. You have time for a longer sit. We've freed up some time for that. So please take advantage of that. I'll share my screen and we'll share some minute. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May enlightened beings of mighty power share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu. Keep smiling, everyone. I'll see you